Wait, before I go any further, there's something you need to understand. What I saw behind that door, it hasn't left me. Every single morning when I open my eyes, it's there. But I'm moving too fast. I need to take you back to the start. Because if I jump straight to what was behind that door without telling you everything that led up to it, you won't get it. You won't feel why it hit me the way it did. And you need to feel this one. My name is Jordan Vale. I'm 27, working as an architectural drafter at a mid-sized firm in Austin, Texas. From the outside, everything about my life looked fine. I had a stable job, a decent car, and a gym bag I carried around way more than I actually used. I was the kind of person who showed up on time, replied to emails fast, and never gave anyone a reason to complain. Dependable, consistent, easy to overlook, the way people are when they're just getting by. But the truth is, nothing in my life actually felt real. About 18 months before all of this, I got out of a relationship I thought was going somewhere. Her name was Dana. She had a way of making you feel like you mattered, until suddenly you didn't. When she left, it wasn't loud or messy. No yelling, no slammed doors. Just a quiet talk on a Tuesday night where she calmly told me she had grown in a different direction, that she needed something I couldn't give her, and that she hoped I'd understand. And I did. That was the worst part. I understood everything she was saying, and I had no idea how to fix it. Because the truth was, I had never shown her who I really was. I gave her the polished version, the guy who remembered birthdays, made reservations, said all the right things. And that version wasn't enough. After Dana, I made a decision. Not a big, dramatic one. Just a quiet rule I set without even realizing it. Keep people at a distance. Be friendly. Be easy to deal with. But don't let anyone get close enough to really know you. Don't give anyone something they can push against. For 18 months, that rule worked perfectly. And my landlord sold the building. Rent in Austin had already been going up for years, but that year, it jumped in a way that felt personal. My apartment went from manageable to something that made my stomach tighten every time I checked my bank account. I spent 2 weeks scrolling listings, running numbers I didn't like, and eventually landing on the only option that made sense, a roommate. I found a listing on a Thursday afternoon. 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a place called Crestfield. The name sounded a lot nicer than the building actually was. Good natural light, in-unit laundry, about 12 minutes from my office by bike. The ad said the current tenant was looking for someone clean, quiet, and respectful. No smoking, no loud guests, no drama. I read that last line twice. No drama. Either this person liked things very simple, or they'd been through enough to appreciate simple. Either way, it sounded exactly like what I needed. I sent a message that same afternoon and got a reply within the hour. We agreed to meet at the apartment that Saturday morning, just to see if we'd be a good fit before signing anything. And I want to be clear about my mindset going into that meeting. I was just looking for a place to sleep. That's it. I wasn't looking for anything more, and I wasn't open to anything more. My whole keep your distance rule was still firmly in place, and I planned to keep it that way. I showed up at 10 a.m. with a 6-pack of sparkling water because I didn't know if I should bring something, and showing up empty-handed felt wrong. Sparkling water felt like the safest option. I knocked on the door. I heard movement inside, something being set down, footsteps coming closer. The door opened, and for about 3 full seconds, I completely forgot how to say my own name. Her name was Iris Calloway. She stood there wearing linen pants with streaks of paint on them and a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was copper red, cut short on the sides and loose on top, slightly messy in a way that looked natural. Sharp cheekbones, steady green eyes that made it feel like she was already ahead of whatever you were about to say. Her gaze dropped to the sparkling water in my hand. "At least you came prepared," she said. "I didn't know what else to bring," I admitted. "That's the right answer," she replied, stepping aside to let me in. The apartment told me everything about her before she said another word. Plants lined every window. Ceramic pieces in soft blues, grays, and rust tones sat neatly on the kitchen shelf. Books were stacked 2 rows deep because there wasn't enough space for all of them. A half-finished sketch was pinned above the table, and a coffee mug on the counter read, "Leave me alone," in big, cheerful letters. Sunlight streamed through the west-facing windows, stretching across the floor in warm, golden lines. We sat at the kitchen table, planning to talk for maybe 30 minutes. We ended up talking for 2 hours. She told me she was a ceramic artist. She ran her own small studio just 3 blocks away, selling her work through a couple of local galleries and an online shop she built herself. She grew up in Tucson, moved to Austin 4 years ago, and stayed because the city had a kind of energy she couldn't find anywhere else. She was 26. She'd been in the apartment for 2 years. Her last roommate moved out to live with a partner. I asked if they'd been close. "We got along," she said. I knew what that meant. Not really. She asked about me, and I told her about the drafting job, the rent situation, and Dana, keeping it as simple as I could. A relationship that ended quietly. No drama, just one of those slow endings where no one is the bad guy, and somehow that makes it worse. She nodded slowly. "Those leave a different kind of mark," she said. "Not exactly a scar, more like a habit." I looked at her. "Yeah, that's exactly it." She held my eyes for a moment, then looked down at her coffee. By the time I got up to leave, she had already offered me the room. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. She looked a little surprised at how fast I answered. I told her it was because the apartment was great and the commute was perfect. Both of those were true. Neither of them was the real reason. Before we go further, take a quick second to check that subscribe button. If you're into this story so far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep sharing stories like this. And let me know in the comments, what do you think is behind that door? All right, back to the story. I moved in 2 weeks later on a cool Saturday in October, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs while the city moved around me in that calm, early fall way when the heat finally eases up and everything feels lighter. Iris helped with the last 2 boxes without me even asking. She just showed up at the top of the stairs, took the heavier one from my hands, and carried it to my room like it was nothing. That was the first real thing I noticed about her. Not the red hair, not the green eyes, not the ceramics. It was that she helped without turning it into a moment. No comment, no attention. She saw something that needed to be done and just did it. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I was already wrong. And I need to stop right here and tell you something before I keep going. By the time November came around, I was in serious trouble. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. I watched it happen day after day and did absolutely nothing to stop it. Let me explain. Living with someone is completely different from just knowing them. You can talk to someone for months and still only see the version they choose to show you. But living together, sharing a kitchen, passing each other in the hallway half asleep, hearing the small sounds they make when they're focused, frustrated, or genuinely happy, that's different. It gets past every wall you built, and it doesn't ask for permission. I learned things about Iris that no conversation could have taught me. She woke up every day at 6 o'clock without an alarm, made her coffee with the focus of someone handling something delicate, and didn't say a single word until she finished her first cup. She spent her mornings at her studio and her afternoons at the kitchen table, sketching ideas with a mechanical pencil she kept tucked behind her left ear. She cooked the same way she worked with clay, by instinct. No measurements, just adjusting as she went. And somehow, everything she made tasted like it had been planned down to the last detail. Her laugh wasn't just a sound. It took over her whole face. And I started noticing the difference between the real one and the polite one. Without realizing it, I started trying to earn the real one. That was the moment I should have pulled back. I didn't. By the middle of October, we had fallen into a routine that felt effortless and dangerous. We ate dinner together most nights, not because we planned it, but because it just kept happening. One of us would start cooking, the other would drift in, and somehow we'd end up sharing a meal. Friday nights turned into watching shows together. She got me hooked on a documentary series about independent creators around the world. I got her into a legal drama she swore she wouldn't like, and by episode 4, she was more into it than I was. We had our own little jokes about the neighbors. We even came up with a shared theory about the guy in the apartment below us, who kept the strangest hours, for reasons neither of us could figure out. Everything felt easy. It felt warm. It felt like something I hadn't felt in a long time. And then Marco showed up. His name was Marco Reyes. He and Iris had been together for 2 years before things ended between them. How exactly? She never fully explained, just said it had been painful, complicated, and something that took her a long time to get over. He was a sculptor, recently back in Austin for a 6-month artist residency downtown. He was tall, confident, and carried himself like someone who had never once felt out of place anywhere. And in the most frustrating way possible, he was genuinely likable. The way he looked at Iris made my stomach tighten every single time. He started coming around. Not too often, not in a way that felt pushy, but steadily. Coffee on a Sunday morning. A gallery visit on a Wednesday afternoon. He never stayed long, and he was always friendly toward me, easygoing in a way that gave me no real reason to dislike him. But I noticed the way Iris changed when he was there. It wasn't obvious, not something most people would catch, but I had started to pick up on the small things. She got a little quieter, more careful with what she said. She laughed at his jokes just a bit too quickly, and with Iris, that usually meant she was covering something she didn't want to deal with yet. I kept telling myself it wasn't my business. I told myself that about 40 times over the course of 2 weeks and believed it less every time. Then one evening, I got home from work and found them sitting at the kitchen table together. Marco leaned forward on his elbows, Iris holding her coffee mug in both hands. They were in the middle of a conversation that stopped the second I walked in. Not in a guilty way. It just stopped. The kind of pause that happens when a moment belongs to two people and a third person suddenly walks in. "Hey," Iris said. "You're home early." "Wrapped up faster than I thought," I replied. Marco smiled, relaxed as ever. "Good to see you, man. We were just catching up." I smiled back, said something polite, made an excuse about needing to finish some work, and went to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall for a while. That was the moment I made a decision I'm not proud of. I pulled back, not in a big, obvious way. Nothing anyone could point to or call out. I just started staying at work later. A few nights, I ate leftovers in my room instead of joining her in the kitchen. When Iris knocked on my door in the morning and asked if I wanted coffee, I'd say I had an early call and pass. I was still friendly, still easy, just less there, and I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting myself from something that was starting to get complicated in a way I didn't belong in. She noticed within 4 days. Iris Calloway noticed everything. She knocked on my door Thursday evening. I was at my desk, pretending to be busy. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, looking at me the same way she looked at pieces that weren't quite right yet. "You've gone somewhere," she said. "I'm right here," I answered. "No," she said softly. "You're being polite." "That's different." I opened my mouth to say I was fine, but she raised one hand, just slightly. "Don't," she said. "I know what fine sounds like from you. You've been saying it for 2 weeks every time I ask about your day." I didn't know what to say to that. She was completely right, and I hadn't expected her to call it out so clearly. "Marco being around isn't what you think," she said carefully. "It's complicated history, not something current." I looked at her. "You don't owe me an explanation." "I know," she said. "I'm giving you one anyway." She held my gaze for a long moment. There was something in her expression, like she was asking me a question I didn't have an answer to yet. Then she nodded once, pushed off the doorframe, and walked back to her room. I sat there for a long time after she left, thinking about what she said. Not current, complicated history. And underneath the relief, I wasn't ready to admit there was something else. Something quiet that made me question why I had pulled away in the first place. If hearing that made me feel this relieved, I didn't have a good answer. What I did have was a clear realization. The keep your distance rule I'd been following for 18 months was starting to fall apart. And the person responsible for that had just walked away from my doorway, and I still hadn't done anything about it. That was Thursday night. Saturday morning, I knocked on her door, and I wasn't ready for what I saw. She was crying. That was the first thing I noticed when the door opened. Not loudly. Not the kind of crying that fills a room. The quiet kind. The kind that happens when someone has been holding too much for too long, and they just can't carry it anymore. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the bed, knees pulled in, holding a piece of paper. Her green eyes were wet, and her face was completely open in a way I had never seen before. I forgot everything I planned to say. I had only knocked to tell her I was heading to the hardware store and ask if she needed anything. That was it. That was the whole plan. And now I was standing there, seeing a side of Iris Calloway I didn't even know existed. And every wall I'd spent 18 months building started to crack in the worst possible way. She looked up at me. No embarrassment. No attempt to hide it. She just met my eyes that weren't steady at all right now, and said quietly, "Close the door." I stepped inside and shut it behind me. Then I sat down on the floor across from her. It didn't feel right to stand over someone who was hurting like that. I didn't say anything. By then, I knew enough about Iris to understand she would talk when she was ready. Pushing her would only make her shut down. She looked at the paper in her hands. "Marco wants to extend his residency," she said. "He told me last night. 6 more months. And he made it clear he's staying because of me." I kept my expression steady. "What did you say?" "I didn't," she replied. "I came home, and I found this." She held up the paper. "It's a letter from the gallery. One of my pieces sold last week. The large blue bowl I worked on for 3 months. The person who bought it left a note, said it made them feel less alone." She paused, looking down at it again. "I don't know why that hit me so hard," she said. "I put so much into this work, and most of the time, I don't even know if it matters. And then a stranger writes 6 sentences saying it did. And Marco is out there asking for something I'm not sure I can give him, and I'm sitting here at 9 o'clock in the morning feeling like a complete mess." I looked at her. "You're not a mess," I said. "You just care a lot. From the outside, those can look the same." She let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. "When did you get so wise?" she asked. "I've always been wise," I said. "I just don't show it off." That actually made her laugh. The real one. The full, genuine laugh. And something in the room shifted. I felt it before I could even explain it. We sat there on the floor for 2 hours that morning. We didn't fix anything. We didn't solve anything. We just talked, the way we used to before I started pulling away. Honest. No filters. No trying to manage what the other person might think. She told me about Marco. What their relationship had really been like. The good parts and the parts that slowly wore her down. She said he wasn't a bad person. Just someone whose idea of who she was didn't match who she actually was. And that she had spent the last year of their relationship trying to become the version he saw in his head. And it cost her something she was still trying to get back. I told her I understood that more than she probably realized. She looked at me closely. "Dana," she asked. "Dana," I confirmed. "Tell me," she said. So I did. This time, I didn't give her the short version like before. I told her everything. I told her what it felt like trying to be the right person for someone and slowly losing track of who I actually was underneath all that effort. I told her about the 18 months I spent keeping people at a distance, about the quiet rule I made for myself without even realizing it. When I finished, she stayed quiet for a second. "I've been doing the same thing," she said, "just in a different way. I keep choosing work over everything else, because work is the one place where it's either real or it isn't. No pretending. No acting." She paused. "People are harder than ceramics." "Yeah," I said. "You can't put people in a kiln and fix them." She looked at me, then shook her head slightly. That might be the most helpful thing anyone has said to me in months. We were both smiling, sitting about 3 feet apart on her floor. And suddenly, I was very aware of that exact distance in a way that made it hard to focus on anything else. Then her phone buzzed on the desk. We both looked at it without trying to. "Marco." His name lit up on the screen. She looked back at me. The smile was still there, but something under it had shifted. "I have to figure out what to say to him," she said. "I know," I replied. I stood up. She stood up too. Now we were closer than we had been sitting down. Neither of us moved away. And for about 4 seconds, the room felt completely still. The only thing that existed was the space between us and how quickly it was disappearing. Then her phone buzzed again. I stepped back. "I'll let you handle it," I said. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on me a second longer than they needed to. I left for the hardware store. I walked through every aisle twice and couldn't remember a single thing I needed. I stood in the parking lot for 10 minutes before getting into my car. On the drive home, I knew something had changed. The careful, controlled version of my life, the one I had been maintaining, had a serious problem now. And that problem had copper red hair, green eyes, and had just trusted me with the most real version of herself I had ever seen. When I got back, her door was closed. I could hear her voice inside, calm and steady, talking on the phone. I went to my room, sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at a blank document for a long time. Then I started typing. I need to be honest about something. What I wrote that night was not meant for her. At least, that's what I told myself while writing it. I said it was just a way to clear my head, to get everything out so I didn't have to carry it around anymore. Something private, just for me. I wrote for almost 2 hours. I wrote about the first morning she made coffee while I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her without saying anything. I wrote about the way she talked about her ceramics like they were alive and needed care. I wrote about that night in October when she sat across from me and said the best thing she had ever made scared her a little, and how that stayed with me for weeks because it described something I felt about my own life but never knew how to say. I wrote about sitting on her floor that same Saturday morning, about what it felt like to be trusted like that, about those 4 seconds after her phone buzzed when neither of us moved. And then I wrote, I don't know what you are to me yet, but I know the apartment feels different when you're not there. I know I haven't felt this awake in 2 years, and I know I'm done pretending this is nothing. I saved the document, closed the laptop, went to bed. What I didn't do was actually close it properly. I know that now. At the time, I thought I had. I pressed the button, the screen went dark, and I assumed it shut down like it always did. But it didn't. It just went to sleep with the document still open. So the next morning, when the screen came back on, the file was right there. Full screen. No title, just the date. I found out because Iris knocked on my door at 7:30 Sunday morning. I opened it half asleep, expecting her to ask about coffee or something small. She stood there holding a mug with both hands, looking at me in a way I had never seen before. Not her usual calm, observant look. Not her full laugh. Something softer, more open, and a little nervous. Your door was open, she said carefully. I was going to leave coffee on your desk. I wasn't trying to read it, but your screen was on. It was right there. I read the first 3 lines before I stopped. Everything in me went completely still. How much is 3 lines? I asked. Enough, she said. I leaned against the doorframe because my legs suddenly didn't feel steady. Iris, let me go first, she said. Please. I stopped. She looked down at the mug for a moment, like she was thinking something through. Then she looked back up. I told Marco no last night, she said. Not because I had to, because it was true. Somewhere between 6 months ago and now, the person I kept wanting to come home to wasn't him. She paused. It was you. She took a breath. I've been careful not to make this messy. We live together. If it went wrong, there's nowhere to go. But I've been careful for so long that it started to feel like I wasn't being honest anymore. And I don't want to be that person. I stood there in the doorway, early morning light coming in, listening to her say the most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. And something in me finally gave way. I left the laptop open, I said. She tilted her head slightly. I closed it wrong, I added. But I think I've been leaving doors open for weeks, kind of hoping you'd walk through one. She stared at me. That is either very romantic, she said, or you seriously need a better plan. Probably both, I said. She laughed. The real one. It filled the space and made everything feel lighter. I took the mug gently from her hands and set it on the table beside my door. She watched me. Her eyes weren't ahead of me anymore. They were right here, fully present. I wrote more than 3 lines, I said. I know, she said softly. And I meant everything I said, too. I know, I replied. I took a step closer. She didn't move back. And just like that, the distance I had been holding for 2 months disappeared. It didn't feel like a decision. It felt like something that had been building for a long time, finally settling into place. What happened after that is ours. But I can tell you this. We stayed in that apartment the entire Sunday. We made breakfast slowly, ate at the kitchen table, talked the way we had learned to talk, honest, open, no pretending. She showed me 3 new sketches she had been too nervous to show anyone. I told her about a design project at work I had been holding back on because I didn't trust myself. She listened, then said 3 simple sentences that changed the way I saw it. By evening, we were on the couch, her feet tucked under my leg. a movie playing that neither of us was really watching. And the apartment felt like the safest place in the world. Weeks passed, then months. Her work took off. The same gallery that sold the blue bowl asked for more. I stopped holding back at work. My creative director called my latest project the best thing I had done since I joined the firm. We even got a plan for the kitchen, something that belonged to both of us. No past attached to it, just something we chose together. One night in late spring, she asked me something. What would you have done if I didn't walk into your room that morning? I thought about it. I would have kept leaving doors open, I said, until you walked through one. She rested her head on my shoulder. Good thing I needed your charger, she said. Outside, Austin was loud, warm, alive. Inside, everything felt exactly right. And it all started because I knocked on a door.